She said, "You're too young for this." I replied, "Maybe, but I've never been more certain." I'd never noticed how quiet the cafe became after 9. The music faded to a low hum, the staff moved slower, and the air felt heavier with the smell of roasted beans and rain on wool coats. She sat across from me at a corner table, her coat draped over the chair like it needed a rest. Everyone else had left. It was just us, the clock on the wall, and the drip of a leaking pipe somewhere behind the counter. Her name was Helen, but she hadn't offered it easily. Even now, she rolled the ceramic cup between her palms like she was holding on to warmth she didn't quite want to share. She was at least 20 years older than me, mid-40s, graceful in a way that made silence feel intentional. A strand of dark hair had fallen loose near her temple, and she didn't fix it. Her lipstick had faded, leaving only a trace of color at the edges of her mouth. "You're too young for this," she said softly. Not scolding, not teasing, more like testing how the words would sit between us. Her eyes flicked up, then down at the table, as if to catch my reaction without looking. I could have laughed, but my throat caught. "Maybe," I said, fingers tightening around my mug. "But I've never been more certain." The sentence came out lower than I meant, almost a whisper. Her lips parted like she might answer, but instead she lifted the cup again. The steam had already gone. She took a sip anyway. She leaned back slightly, but her knee stayed near mine under the table. Not touching, but near enough that the heat of her skin made my jeans feel thin. I found myself tracing the rim of my mug with my thumb, not sure what to do with my hands. She noticed. Her gaze lingered there a heartbeat too long. "You shouldn't," she began, then stopped. The corner of her mouth twitched as if she'd said the wrong word. Her left hand, free of the cup, reached for the sugar packet but missed and brushed against my fingers. Instead, it wasn't an accident. Or maybe it was. Neither of us moved away. Her perfume was faint, something woody with a hint of citrus, and the smell pulled up a memory I didn't even have. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you always talk like that?" "Like what?" I asked. "Like you know where this is going." "I don't," I said, "but I know where I want to be." She laughed once, short and breathy, like she wasn't supposed to. Her shoulders softened, but her eyes stayed sharp. She tapped the sugar packet against the table twice, a tiny metronome between us. Outside, the rain had picked up, the window rattled faintly. "You're serious?" she murmured. "I'm here," I said. Her hand stayed near mine on the table. The warmth between our palms felt louder than the cafe's quiet. She looked at me, really looked, and for a moment the air thinned, like the room had tipped forward. Then the bell over the door chimed. We both turned. Someone stepped inside, bringing a rush of cold air and the smell of wet pavement. Helen's hand pulled back, just slightly, leaving only the ghost of her touch on my skin. I didn't move. Neither did she. Her eyes flicked to the newcomer, then back to me, unreadable. "Maybe we should," she began, but the rest of her sentence dissolved into the sound of the door closing. The door shut, and the cafe felt smaller. A man in a raincoat ordered to go. The hiss of the espresso machine masked the silence that had settled between us. Helen traced a finger along the edge of her saucer, not looking at me. Her hair caught the low light, a faint copper sheen in the black strands. "I shouldn't even be here this late," she said. "I promised myself no more complications." She didn't explain what that meant, and I didn't ask. I watched the muscles in her jaw move as she bit the inside of her cheek, a small habit I'd begun to notice. "I'm not looking for complications," I said. She gave a quiet laugh, almost bitter. That's exactly how they start. The man in the raincoat left, and we were alone again. She stood, gathering her coat, but instead of putting it on, draped it over the back of the chair. The thin knit of her sweater clung to her shoulders. She smelled faintly of rain and something herbal. I tried to keep my eyes on my coffee. "I was married once," she said suddenly. "A long time ago." She didn't look at me when she said it. "He liked younger women." I thought I'd grow out of being angry about it. Her thumb worried a loose thread at the cuff of her sweater. The vulnerability was so quiet I almost missed it. "I've never been married," I said. "I've barely been anything." She smiled faintly, still not meeting my eyes. "You're too young to talk like that. I'm old enough to know when someone's worth staying up for." That made her look up. Her pupils widened just a little. She reached for her coat, then hesitated, her fingers grazing my shoulder as she steadied herself. It was only a second, but her touch sent a shiver down the back of my neck. She must have felt it. She withdrew her hand quickly and stared at the window. I have a son, she said. Your age. People would talk. They already do, I said softly. Not about us. About everything. Her breath left her in a quiet exhale. She turned toward me, closer now, one hand resting on the back of my chair, as if deciding whether to leave. Her face was inches from mine. I could feel the warmth of her breath as she spoke. You make it sound easy, she whispered. It isn't, I said. But some things aren't supposed to be. She stayed there, close enough that her hair brushed my cheek when she shifted. The cafe lights dimmed automatically at closing time, casting us in a softer glow. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she let her hand rest on my shoulder, not quite an embrace, but not accidental either. We sat like that, her hand warm through my shirt, my heart hammering. The unspoken weight between us heavier than words, but holding us there, Jay. Just the same. The cafe lights blinked once, closing time. Helen withdrew her hand from my shoulder, but only just. The staff were stacking chairs at the far end, their movements slow, unaware. She slipped her coat over her arm, not on her back, and glanced at the door like she was weighing an escape. Walk me out, she asked. Outside, rain had thinned to a mist. The street lamps glowed yellow, each puddle reflecting a trembling halo. We fell into step without speaking. Her umbrella tilted over both of us, but she held it so low our heads almost touched. Do you do this often? She said after a beat. Do what? Wait around after closing. Follow women out into the rain. I smiled, but my throat tightened. Just you. That made her stop walking for half a second. She started again, slower now. Our hands brushed once, twice, then stayed apart. We turned down a narrow street toward the parking lot. She reached into her bag for her keys, but her phone lit up instead, a name flashing across the screen. She flipped it face down before I could read it. A tiny crease formed between her brows. Sorry, she murmured. No reason to be. I tried not to sound curious. She unlocked her car, but didn't open the door. Instead, she leaned back against the doorframe, eyes closing briefly. Rain beaded on her coat sleeve. I caught the faint tremor of her fingers. You make this feel, she opened her eyes. Dangerous. I stepped closer without meaning to. You don't have to stay. I know. She tilted her head up at me, the streetlight catching the wet strands of her hair. But I am. The umbrella tilted further, forgotten. Water dotted my shirt. She reached up, brushed a droplet from my collarbone with her thumb. Her touch lingered there. My breath caught. She noticed. Inside the car, her phone buzzed again, a muffled, insistent vibration. She turned toward it, then back to me, torn. I know, I said quietly. We were inches apart now. Her hand slid from my collar to my shoulder, gripping lightly as if to steady herself. I felt the weight of her hesitation in that small pressure. The air between us thinned, heavy with rain and perfume and the taste of something about to happen. She leaned in a fraction, not enough to close the distance, but enough that her breath warmed my cheek. I felt myself leaning too, until our foreheads almost touched. She froze. People will see, she whispered. Not here, I said. A beat passed. 2. Neither of us moved. Her hand tightened on my shoulder, then released. But she didn't step away. Instead, she let the umbrella slip from her grip. It clattered softly to the wet pavement, leaving us both uncovered, closer than we'd ever been. The rain running down our faces like a secret we couldn't quite speak. Rain slid down my neck, cold as pins. Helen stood so close her coat brushed my stomach, her eyes dark, unreadable. We'd been still for too long. The city had gone quiet around us. The sound of the rain was like a curtain closing, leaving only the two of us inside. She exhaled sharply, almost a tremor. This is ridiculous, she said, voice low. I can't keep. She stopped herself, pressing the heel of her hand to her temple as though trying to rub away the thought. What? I asked. You. Me. She met my gaze then, a flash of defiance. You're making me, another pause. Feel things I promised myself I wouldn't. My heart thudded. You're not the only one. She let out a bitter laugh that broke halfway. Don't say that. I mean it. My voice was closer to a whisper now, the space between us swallowing sound. Since that first night, Stop. But she didn't move away. Her hand went up, brushing wet hair from her face, and for a second it hovered in the air between us. I caught her wrist gently before she could pull it back. She didn't fight it. Our hands stayed locked, trembling slightly. Her phone buzzed again inside the car. She ignored it. A pulse of light flickered across the wet pavement. Then we went dark. Who is it? I asked quietly. It doesn't matter. It matters to you. She swallowed hard, rain running down her jaw. It's my son. He thinks I'm still at work. I let go of her wrist slowly, but she caught my fingers instead. I'm not here to ruin anything, I murmured. You already are. Her voice cracked, but her grip didn't loosen. I stepped in, until the top of her head was beneath my chin. She tilted her face up, eyes searching mine. This isn't fair, she whispered. I don't care. My hand rose almost on its own, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek, tucking it behind her ear. Her skin was cool from the rain, but her pulse beat hot beneath it. She leaned into my palm for a heartbeat, then drew back just enough to look at me again. You're so young, she said. And I'm tired of pretending I don't notice you. Her confession hung there between us like a struck chord. She stepped closer, until her forehead touched my chin. My other hand found her waist, fingers spread against damp fabric. She shivered, but didn't move. We stood like that, rain slicking our clothes to our skin, breaths tangling. The world narrowed to a small circle of heat and hesitation. Then she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. Tell me to stop. I didn't. Her lips parted, her eyes closing the tiniest bit, and I felt myself bending toward her. The smell of rain, perfume, and skin filled my lungs. Every nerve leaned forward. And just as our mouths were about to meet, a voice called her name from across the lot. The voice cut through the rain like a blade. Helen. She froze against me, every muscle taut. I could feel the shift in her body before I even turned. A tall man stepped out from under the awning of a closed pharmacy, his hood pushed back, face shadowed by the street lamp. He was older than me, younger than her, eyes narrowing as he took us in. Helen pulled away so quickly the umbrella tumbled from my hand again. She stood half a step behind me now as if distance could undo what had just been about to happen. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp of her bag. What are you doing here? She called out, her voice too bright. The man didn't answer right away. He walked closer, hands shoved into his coat pockets. When he spoke, his voice was low and tight. You didn't tell me you were seeing someone. I blinked. You know him? I asked, though her expression had already told me yes. She hesitated, then said, This is Marcus, my colleague. A pause long enough to hear the rain hiss. He's also my son's friend. The words landed like a stone in my gut. My hand, still half raised toward her, dropped to my side. I took a small step back, not from Marcus but from her, as if the air had shifted temperature. Marcus's eyes flicked from me to her. Does your son know? No, she said quickly. Because there's nothing to know. I caught the tremor in her voice. She wasn't lying, not exactly, but it wasn't the truth either. Her fingers trembled as she brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, not looking at me now. I thought you said you didn't. I started, but the rest died in my throat. She turned then, too fast, bumping my shoulder as she moved, and whispered under her breath, Not here. Not now. The brush of her coat against my arm was electric, almost painful, like a door shutting in my face. Marcus took another step forward, but Helen raised a hand to stop him. Go home, she said softly. Please. He hesitated, jaw tight, then retreated under the awning again, glancing back once before disappearing into the mist. The street felt empty and too loud all at once. Helen turned back to me, eyes wet with more than rain. I should have told you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I should have told you everything. I swallowed hard. Then tell me now. She stepped closer again, trembling, until her forehead almost touched my chin. Her hand found my wrist, a desperate grip. If we keep going, she whispered, there's no way back. Not for me. Not for you. Her confession hung between us like lightning about to strike. She didn't let go of my wrist. I didn't step back. I don't care, I said. Her eyes searched mine, dark and wet, and for the first time she didn't pull away. Then don't, she murmured. The street was empty now. The pharmacy lights had gone dark. Marcus had vanished into the mist, and the rain had softened to a fine spray that clung to skin like static. Helen still held my wrist, her thumb pressed just below my pulse, as if she could feel the beat of everything we hadn't said. I should go, she murmured. You don't want to, I said. Her eyes flicked down, then up again. No. But wanting isn't enough. It never is. I stepped closer until there was only a breath between us. The air felt heavier, warmer, though we were both wet and cold. My free hand rose slowly, giving her time to stop me, and brushed a damp curl from her cheek. She didn't move. Her breath came shallow, audible over the rain. "I'm tired of running from this," I said quietly. "You think it's that simple?" "No. I think it's that hard." Her lips parted, a tremor crossing them, and for a moment she leaned into my palm the way someone leans into a warm window. Her body swayed infinitesimally closer, until her forehead touched my chin. The rain gathered on our lashes and dripped between us. "If I stay," she whispered, "I lose the story I've been telling about who I am. And if you go," my voice cracked, "I lose this." Her eyes closed briefly, like the word hurt. Neither of us moved. The world was down to heartbeats and the smell of rain and skin. I felt her trembling against me, not from cold. "You have to choose," I said, softer than a breath. She drew back just enough to look at me, not away, not down, but directly. In her face was every sleepless night, every rule she'd written for herself and broken. She raised a hand and placed it flat against my chest, feeling the rise and fall. "I don't want to be a mistake you regret," she said. "You're the first thing I've been sure about in years." For a long second, we simply stared, rain pooling in the corners of our mouths. Then she let out a sound, half sigh, half laugh, and stepped the final inch forward. Her forehead pressed to mine. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we stop hiding," she said. "Whatever it costs." I closed my eyes. No more hiding. We didn't move beyond that. Not a kiss. Not yet. But our arms wrapped around each other like a shelter. The decision had been made without words. It sat between us, fragile and real. For the first time, there was no question in her gaze, only the steadiness of someone who had chosen, and knew I had too. We stayed like that in the rain, two people holding on to a truth they couldn't take back, knowing it would change everything, but breathing easier because at last it was out in the open. By the time we reached her apartment, the rain had stopped. The city smelled rinsed and new. We climbed the narrow stairwell quietly, our damp clothes brushing now and then. Neither of us had spoken since the parking lot. There was no need. Our hands had found each other somewhere between streetlights. Not dramatic, just fingers threading together, knuckles chilled from the night air. Inside, she left the lights low. The small living room glowed amber from a single lamp. She hung her coat carefully over the back of a chair and looked at me like she wasn't sure I was real. Drops of water still clung to her hair. One slid down her neck and disappeared beneath her collar. "I thought you might change your mind," she said softly. "I almost did," I admitted. "But I didn't." She exhaled, shoulders loosening, and for the first time that evening she smiled without flinching. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." I squeezed her hand. "But I'm here." We stood in the center of her living room, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. She reached up, fingers brushing my jaw as if memorizing its shape. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, letting my thumb rest at her temple. She leaned into it, eyes closing. There was no rush now. The urgency of before had dissolved into something steadier. "I don't know what happens next," she murmured. "Neither do I said. "But I want to find out with you." She let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sigh. "You sound older than you are." "You make me feel older," I said, and she rolled her eyes but didn't pull away. We moved at the same time then, a quiet convergence. She stepped into my arms, and I wrapped them around her, holding her close. No sudden kiss, no dramatic music, just the warmth of her head against my chest, her fingers slipping under the back of my shirt to feel my spine, the smell of rain and coffee clinging to both of us. We stood like that, a long hug that felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. When she tilted her face up, I bent and pressed a slow kiss to her forehead. She closed her eyes. Our hands stayed entwined even after we sat down together on the couch, shoulders touching, knees knocking. She reached for my other hand, holding both now, her thumb making small circles against my skin. "I'm not running anymore," she said quietly. "Me neither," I replied. We sat there in the dim light, two people who had finally stopped circling the thing they wanted. The age, the hesitation, the fear, it was all still there, but now it sat outside the circle we'd made with our joined hands. Inside, it was just us, breathing the same air, present. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?